Have you ever wondered why a dream can wake you with a feeling of absolute terror? Or why fairy tales thousands of years old still deeply move us? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, wrote in his final work, Man and His Symbols, Modern man has forgotten what previous ages knew perfectly well. And that was not a simple statement. It was a warning. Imagine this. A man comes to Jung, describing his dream, a dream about an ancient, multi-headed dragon guarding a treasure. The strange thing is, this man had never read about this symbol in any book. So how did that image appear in his mind? The answer will change how you view yourself, and that is the subject of our talk today. Section 1. Introduction. In Man and His Symbols, the final work before his death in 1961, Carl Jung devoted his last year to communicating his profound insights on the relationship between ancient mythology and the modern human soul. This was not an academic exercise for Jung. It was his final message to humanity, a message he felt was urgent enough to break his lifelong reluctance to write for the general public. Jung had a dream that convinced him to write this book. In the dream, he was speaking not to fellow scholars, but to the average person about his discoveries. Jung recognized this as a message from his own unconscious that his ideas needed to reach beyond academic circles. And so, just 10 days before his final illness, he completed his section of this remarkable book. What you're about to discover is how these ancient symbols and mythological patterns continue to operate silently in your mind right now, influencing your decisions and emotions without your awareness. These forces are not remnants of a superstitious past, but living psychological realities that shape your experience in profound ways. And when you understand this hidden dimension of yourself, you'll gain access to a wisdom so profound that it has guided humanity through its darkest moments for thousands of years. You'll begin to recognize the ancient patterns operating in your dreams, your relationships, and your innermost feelings. But I must warn you, once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. Your perception of yourself and the world around you will be forever changed. In the next hour, we'll explore the mysterious connection between ancient myths and your own psychology. We'll decode the universal symbols that appear across cultures separated by vast distances and time periods. And most importantly, we'll discover how this understanding can transform your experience of being human in the modern world. Are you ready to begin this journey? Then let's step together into the realm where mythology and psychology meet, the realm Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. Section 2. The connection between mythology and psychology. The connection between mythology and psychology runs deeper than most people realize. And Jung's discovery of this connection began with a shocking realization. As a young psychiatrist working at the Burghölzli Mental Hospital in Switzerland, Jung observed something that contradicted the scientific understanding of his time. Patients with no education in mythology or ancient symbolism were producing dreams, fantasies, and delusions filled with precisely the same symbols found in ancient myths from around the world. How was this possible? The prevailing view of the mind as a blank slate written upon solely by personal experience couldn't explain this phenomenon. Jung defined the collective unconscious as a part of the human psyche that is not the result of personal experience but is the common heritage of all mankind. Unlike the personal unconscious, which contains forgotten or repressed material from an individual's life, the collective unconscious contains inherited patterns and tendencies common to all humans. This is not just an abstract concept. It's the living source of our deepest impulses, fears, and aspirations. This reservoir of collective experience doesn't contain specific memories, but rather what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns and images that have existed since the dawn of time. Jung discovered this through his work with patients whose dreams contained symbols they could not possibly have known about consciously, symbols that appeared in ancient myths from cultures they had never studied. Let me share a striking example from Jung's own practice. A woman patient told Jung she had dreamed of a snake in her belly. Jung was puzzled at first, wondering if she was perhaps mentally unstable. But then he realized something profound. This exact symbol of the serpent in the abdomen appears in ancient Indian traditions as Kundalini. As Jung wrote, that is not an individual fantasy, it is a collective fantasy. Although the woman had nothing to do with India, and although the image is entirely unknown to us, this symbol emerged from the collective unconscious they all share. The snake in the belly perfectly illustrates what Jung meant by an archetypal image. In Tantric yoga, Kundalini is depicted as a coiled serpent at the base of the spine that, when awakened, rises through energy centers in the body, bringing spiritual enlightenment. This woman, with no knowledge of Eastern spiritual traditions, produced the same symbolic image from her unconscious mind. Another remarkable case involved a man who dreamed of being crucified, with crowds of people watching. The imagery closely paralleled ancient initiation rites the man had never studied. Jung recognized that these weren't random imaginings, but expressions of universal human experiences encoded in symbolic form. This is crucial to understand. The myths of ancient civilizations are not just entertaining stories. They are expressions of the collective unconscious, the deep psychological patterns shared by all humans, across all cultures and time periods. Mythology, in Jung's view, is the projection of the collective unconscious, or as he put it, myths are first and foremost psychic phenomena that reveal the nature of the soul. They represent humanity's earliest attempts to understand the profound forces operating within the human psyche. When ancient Greeks told stories of Zeus hurling thunderbolts, they were giving symbolic form to archetypal experiences of power, authority, and the sometimes destructive nature of masculine energy. When ancient Egyptians depicted Osiris dying and being reborn, they were expressing the universal human experience of psychological transformation and renewal. Think about that for a moment. The same psychological forces that created the myths of ancient Greece, Egypt, or China are still active within your mind today. They influence your dreams, your fears, your greatest aspirations, and your deepest relationships. And this leads us to a profound question. If these ancient symbols and patterns are still operating within us, how might they be influencing your life right now, beneath the surface of your awareness? Perhaps you've experienced an inexplicable fear or fascination that doesn't seem connected to your personal history. Or maybe you've noticed yourself behaving in ways that seem to follow an ancient script, despite your best intentions to chart your own course. The ancient Romans had a saying, "The fates lead the willing and drag the unwilling." Jung might have rephrased this. The archetypes express themselves consciously through those who recognize them and unconsciously through those who don't. The difference is profound. When we remain unconscious of these archetypal patterns, they can possess us, driving behavior we don't understand and can't control. But when we become conscious of them, we gain the possibility of relationship with these forces, neither completely controlled by them, nor completely in control of them, but in a dynamic dance of mutual influence. And that is precisely what mythology offered our ancestors, a way to consciously engage with the archetypal forces of the psyche. Through ritual, story, and symbol, they maintained a living relationship with the powers that modern people experience only as unconscious compulsions or psychological symptoms. Before we move deeper into exploring specific archetypes, I want you to consider this. What recurring patterns have you noticed in your own life? What themes seem to repeat themselves in your relationships, your work, your dreams? These patterns may be pointing to the archetypal forces most active in your own psyche. Section 3. Archetypes in Ancient Mythology. Jung's concept of archetypes revolutionized our understanding of both psychology and mythology. But what exactly are these mysterious forces? Jung defined archetypes as innate tendencies that shape human behavior and experience. They are not learned. They are inherent patterns in the human psyche. Think of them as the psychological equivalent of instincts, pre-programmed patterns that organize our experience in specific ways. The key distinction Jung made is that archetypes themselves cannot be directly perceived. What we experience are archetypal images, specific expressions of these underlying patterns that take form in our consciousness. This is a crucial difference. The archetypal image of the Great Mother might be Isis in Egyptian mythology, Mary in Christian tradition, or Kuan Yin in Buddhism. But the underlying archetype transcends any specific representation. These archetypes express themselves through universal symbols and images that appear consistently across diverse cultures and time periods. It's as if the human psyche speaks a symbolic language that transcends cultural boundaries. In Man and His Symbols, Jung writes, "An archetype is like an old watercourse along which the water of life has flowed for centuries, digging a deep channel for itself. The longer it has flowed in this channel, the more likely it is that sooner or later the water will return to its old bed." This vivid metaphor helps us understand both the persistence of archetypal patterns and their fluid nature. The water of psychic energy tends to follow established pathways, but it can also carve new channels through the landscape of consciousness. Let's explore the primary archetypes Jung identified in ancient mythology. Number 1. The Anima and Animus. These represent the feminine aspect in a man and the masculine aspect in a woman. Jung believed that because we're biologically programmed to relate to the opposite sex, we develop an innate image of that other gender. In Greek mythology, Aphrodite and Helen of Troy embody the anima, the idealized feminine that plays a powerful role in a man's psychology. When a modern man becomes inexplicably captivated by a woman, often it is his own anima being projected onto her. Similarly, the animus appears in mythology as the masculine figures in feminine-focused myths. Figures like Hermes, Apollo, or Odysseus often represent different aspects of the animus. When a woman dreams of an unknown male figure guiding her or challenging her, this often represents her animus at work. Jung documented numerous cases where patients' romantic difficulties stemmed from unhealthy relationships with their own anima or animus. One male patient was serially attracted to cold, destructive women who ultimately hurt him. In therapy, he discovered he was projecting his own unacknowledged anima, shaped by his relationship with his cold, critical mother, onto these women. By becoming conscious of this pattern, he could begin to transform it. Number 2, the shadow. This archetype represents the aspects of ourselves we reject or deny. It appears in mythology as dragons, monsters, and dark deities. The shadow holds both our darkest impulses and our unrealized potential. In Greek mythology, figures like Hades or the Minotaur represent aspects of the shadow that humans must confront. The Minotaur, half man, half bull, perfectly symbolizes the animal nature that civilized humans try to repress. Yet in confronting this creature, the hero Theseus must acknowledge his own animal nature. Jung observed that the shadow becomes more powerful and potentially destructive the more we deny it. One of his patients, a minister known for his moral rigidity, suffered from violent nightmares and disturbing fantasies. By acknowledging these shadow elements rather than repressing them, the man achieved greater psychological balance and, ironically, became more genuinely moral rather than merely self-righteous. Number 3, the wise old man or woman. This archetype embodies wisdom and guidance. Figures like Merlin in Arthurian legend or Athena in Greek mythology represent this inner source of wisdom and knowledge. Jung noted that this archetype often appears in dreams at critical junctures in a person's life, offering guidance when conscious knowledge has reached its limits. A young woman Jung treated dreamed of an old woman showing her a path through a dark forest during a period of profound confusion in her life. After exploring the symbolism, she recognized that her own intuitive wisdom was trying to guide her toward a solution her conscious mind couldn't see. Number 4, the self. This is the central organizing principle of the psyche, representing wholeness and integration. It's symbolized by supreme deities like Zeus or Odin, or by geometric symbols like the circle or mandala. The self is the goal of psychological development, what Jung called individuation. Unlike the ego, which represents our conscious identity, the self encompasses both conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche in balanced harmony. Jung documented numerous cases where mandalas or other symbols of wholeness spontaneously appeared in patients' dreams or artwork during periods of psychological integration. One patient, after months of emotional turmoil, dreamed of a perfect circle containing symmetrically arranged symbols. Without any knowledge of Eastern spiritual practices, she had produced a classic mandala, a symbol of the self that appears in traditions worldwide. Other important archetypes Jung identified include the Great Mother, both nurturing and terrible, the Divine Child, representing renewal and potential, and the Trickster, embodying cleverness, disruption, and transformation. Figures like Hermes, Loki, or Coyote exemplify the trickster's ability to overturn established order and bring both chaos and new possibilities. What's fascinating is how these same archetypes appear across cultures that had no contact with each other. This provides powerful evidence for Jung's theory of the collective unconscious. These archetypes aren't just abstract concepts. They're living psychological forces that continue to shape your experience. The Great Mother archetype influences how you relate to nurturing figures and your own capacity to nurture. The Trickster archetype emerges when established patterns in your life break down, often bringing uncomfortable but necessary change. Jung emphasized that archetypes themselves are neutral, neither good nor bad. Their effect depends on how conscious we are of their influence and how we relate to them. The Great Mother can manifest as nurturing wisdom or as devouring possessiveness. The hero can express itself as genuine courage or as reckless ego inflation. This brings us to a crucial point. Psychological health involves establishing a conscious relationship with these archetypal forces rather than being unconsciously ruled by them. When we remain unconscious of archetypal influences, we tend to either be possessed by them or to project them onto others. For example, a person unconscious of their own shadow might project it onto others, seeing in them the very qualities they deny in themselves. Political and religious demonization of outsider groups often involves such shadow projection on a collective scale. Similarly, many romantic disappointments stem from anima or animus projections. The initial idealization followed by bitter disillusionment in relationships often reflects the unconscious projection and subsequent withdrawal of these archetypal images. I'd love to hear which mythological archetype resonates most with you and why. Please share in the comments below. As we move now to examine the hero archetype in greater depth, consider which archetypal patterns might be most active in your own life. Are you living out a hero's journey? Are you struggling with shadow elements? Is the wise old man or woman trying to guide you? Becoming conscious of these patterns is the first step toward engaging with them more constructively. Section 4. The hero and the hero's journey. The hero archetype deserves special attention, as it represents the human journey toward psychological development and wholeness. Of all the archetypal patterns Jung identified, the hero's journey most clearly illustrates the process of individuation, the path to psychological integration that Jung saw as the central task of human life. Jung wrote something profound about the hero's journey. He is no hero who never met the dragon, or who, if he once saw it, declared afterwards that he saw nothing. Only by confronting our inner dragons can we claim the treasure they guard. This simple statement contains a profound truth. Heroism isn't about avoiding challenges, but about willingly confronting them. And the dragons we must face are not external monsters, but our own inner fears, limitations, and unconscious forces. The motif of the hero appears with remarkable consistency across world mythologies. From Gilgamesh to Odysseus, from King Arthur to Buddha, from Osiris to Christ, the hero's journey follows a pattern so consistent that mythologist Joseph Campbell, building on Jung's work, called it the monomyth, the single story that appears in countless variations across human cultures. Let's break down this journey and its psychological significance. Number 1. The call to adventure. This represents the awakening of the need for psychological growth. Just as the mythical hero is called away from the familiar world, we too receive calls to venture beyond our comfortable identity and explore the unknown parts of ourselves. Jung observed this pattern in many patients whose psychological development began with a crisis or call they initially resisted. One businessman came to Jung complaining of depression and meaninglessness despite his material success. Dreams of ancient temples and unfamiliar landscapes were his psyche's call to adventure, an invitation to explore spiritual and symbolic dimensions he had long neglected. Number 2. Crossing the threshold. This is the moment when we leave the familiar territory of the conscious mind and venture into the unconscious. It's often precipitated by a crisis or challenge that our usual ways of thinking cannot resolve. In mythology, this threshold is often guarded by a fearsome figure. In the Odyssey, Odysseus must pass between Scylla and Charybdis. In Egyptian mythology, Anubis guards the threshold between life and death. These threshold guardians represent the fear we must overcome to venture into unknown psychological territory. Jung noted how physical illness or emotional breakdown often served as threshold experiences for his patients, forcing them beyond familiar psychological patterns. One woman's severe anxiety attacks, which traditional medicine couldn't relieve, ultimately led her to explore her unconscious through analysis, a journey that eventually resolved both her symptoms and her deeper existential questions. Number 3. Facing trials and challenges. The hero confronts monsters, endures tests, and overcomes obstacles. Psychologically, this represents confronting the shadow, the rejected aspects of ourselves that we must integrate for wholeness. Jung documented numerous cases where patients initially entered analysis for symptom relief, but eventually found themselves confronting painful truths about themselves they had long avoided. One politically conservative minister had to confront his repressed sexual desires. A perfect mother had to acknowledge her hidden resentment toward her children. Each faced the equivalent of the mythological monster, the disowned aspects of themselves. Number 4. Meeting the mentor. Heroes often receive guidance from wise figures. This represents our connection to inner wisdom, or what Jung called the wise old man or woman archetype. Jung himself played this mentoring role for many patients, but he emphasized that true guidance ultimately comes from within. He documented cases where patients dreamed of wise figures offering guidance before making critical life decisions. One woman dreamed of an old man giving her a golden key before she made a crucial career change that ultimately aligned her outer life with her inner values. Number 5. The supreme ordeal, the climactic confrontation with the greatest challenge, often involving symbolic death and rebirth. Psychologically, this is the confrontation with our deepest fears and the transformation that follows. Jung saw this pattern in profound psychological transformations that often followed periods of severe distress or even breakdown. One patient experienced a psychotic episode that, when properly understood and integrated, led to a spiritual awakening and creative renewal. Jung didn't romanticize such painful episodes, but recognized their potentially transformative nature when approached with proper understanding. Number 6. The return. The hero returns with the elixir or treasure, bringing its benefits back to the ordinary world. In psychological terms, this represents integrating unconscious insights into conscious life. Many of Jung's patients experience this as a newfound creativity, wisdom, or capacity for relationship following their psychological journey. One businessman who initially sought therapy for anxiety discovered artistic talents he had suppressed since childhood. His return involved establishing a balance between his practical business activities and his newfound creative expression. Consider the Greek myth of Perseus confronting Medusa. Perseus must face this terrifying creature whose gaze turns men to stone, a perfect symbol for confronting the paralyzing aspects of our unconscious. He succeeds by viewing her reflection in his shield rather than looking directly at her, a beautiful metaphor for how we can safely approach frightening psychological content through symbols and reflection. The shield represents the protective distance that symbols provide, allowing us to confront terrifying truths indirectly that might overwhelm us if faced directly. This is precisely why Jung emphasized dream analysis and active imagination as safer ways to engage with unconscious content than direct confrontation. Or, think about Theseus entering the labyrinth to confront the Minotaur. The labyrinth represents the confusing terrain of the unconscious mind, while the Minotaur embodies the shadow, half human, half beast, representing our own rejected animal nature. Theseus can only find his way with the help of Ariadne's thread, a beautiful symbol for maintaining connection with consciousness while venturing into the unconscious depths. Jung encouraged his patients to maintain this thread through journaling, creating art, or maintaining dialogue with a therapist while exploring their unconscious material. Jung made a startling observation about those who refuse their own hero's journey. They often end up becoming victims of those who have undertaken theirs. When we refuse to confront our own dragons, we remain unconscious of their influence on us, making us vulnerable to manipulation by others who understand these forces better than we do. This explains why people who haven't confronted their own shadow are often easily manipulated through fear or prejudice. Politicians who understand shadow dynamics can activate collective fears and projections in those who haven't done their own psychological work. Similarly, people who haven't integrated their anima or animus projections remain vulnerable to emotional manipulation in relationships. The person who hasn't examined their own father complex may unconsciously seek authority figures to follow, sometimes with destructive consequences. Jung didn't see the hero's journey as something undertaken once and completed. Rather, he saw life as a series of heroic cycles, each bringing new challenges, new aspects of shadow to integrate, and new potential for growth. The businessman who confronts his shadow greed might later need to face his fear of intimacy. The woman who integrates her animus might later need to confront her own mortality. This cyclic nature of the hero's journey explains why many mythological heroes face multiple adventures rather than a single quest. Hercules performs 12 labors. Odysseus faces numerous challenges on his journey home. Each new challenge represents another aspect of the psyche to be integrated. The ultimate goal of this heroic journey isn't the egotistical pursuit of personal glory. Rather, it's the achievement of what Jung called individuation, the integration of conscious and unconscious elements into a more complete and authentic selfhood. The true hero returns from the journey not inflated but humbled, aware of both their capabilities and their limitations. They've confronted their dragons and claimed their treasures, but they've also learned the limits of ego and the importance of connection to something larger than themselves. As Jung wrote, the goal of individuation is nothing less than to divest the self of the false wrappings of the persona and the suggestive power of primordial images. In other words, to become authentically ourselves, free from both social masks and unconscious compulsions. This heroic journey isn't reserved for mythological figures or exceptional individuals. It's the birthright and challenge of every human being. And it's a journey you're already on, whether you recognize it or not. What dragons are you currently facing? What treasures might they be guarding? And what new aspect of yourself might be waiting to be born through this heroic confrontation? Section 5. Universal symbols across different cultures. Jung was fascinated by how certain symbols appear consistently across different cultures, even those that had no contact with each other. This provided powerful evidence for his theory of the collective unconscious. He wrote, "There are as many archetypes as there are typical situations in life. Endless repetition has engraved these experiences into our psychic constitution, not in the form of images, filled with content, but at first only as forms without content, representing merely the possibility of a certain type of perception and action. Let's explore some of these universal symbols as analyzed in man and his symbols. Number 1. The dragon and serpent. This symbol appears in virtually every culture, but with fascinating variations. In Western mythology, dragons represent chaos and destruction, forces that must be conquered. St. George slaying the dragon epitomizes this tradition. The hero who slays the dragon represents the triumph of consciousness over unconscious forces. Jung explains, myths about overcoming the monster are universal. These myths symbolize man's conquest of his lower nature. The dragon slaying represents the ego's necessary victory over unconscious chaos at certain stages of development. In Eastern traditions, particularly Chinese mythology, dragons symbolize wisdom, good fortune, and power. They control water, bring rain, and represent imperial authority. Unlike their Western counterparts, Eastern dragons are not adversaries but powerful allies when properly respected. This difference reflects different cultural attitudes toward the unconscious. Western consciousness tends to emphasize the separation and domination of nature, while Eastern traditions more often seek harmony with natural forces. In Indian traditions, the serpent Kundalini represents the dormant spiritual power coiled at the base of the spine. When awakened through yogic practice, this serpent energy rises through the chakras, bringing enlightenment and transformation. Jung documented cases where patients with no knowledge of Eastern traditions spontaneously produced imagery of rising serpent energy during periods of psychological transformation. One Western woman dreamed of a serpent rising through her body during a period of intense psychological growth, a perfect parallel to the Kundalini concept she had never studied. Jung saw the dragon as representing what he called the chaotic aspect of the unconscious, both terrifying and containing treasure. The dragon guards gold in many myths, symbolizing how our greatest psychological resources are often protected by our most frightening internal forces. As Jung wrote, "In the unconscious is everything that has been rejected by consciousness, everything that we've denied, everything we don't want to know about ourselves. At the same time, it's full of something absolutely essential which we need." Number 2. The world tree. This symbol appears across diverse cultures. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is the cosmic tree connecting the 9 worlds. Its roots extend into the underworld, its trunk occupies the middle world, and its branches reach into the heavens. In Buddhism, the Bodhi tree under which Buddha achieved enlightenment serves a similar symbolic function, connecting earth and heaven, the mundane and the transcendent. The tree of life appears in traditions from ancient Mesopotamia to Jewish Kabbalah. In the book of Genesis, both the tree of knowledge and the tree of life stand at the center of Eden. Jung analyzed the tree as a symbol connecting the 3 levels of consciousness. Its roots reach into the depths of the unconscious, its trunk represents our conscious experience, and its branches extend toward higher consciousness. Jung documented numerous cases where tree imagery appeared at pivotal moments in his patient's psychological development. One man, during a period of profound psychological integration, dreamed of a magnificent tree growing through and connecting all the floors of a building. A perfect symbol for the connection being established between different levels of his psyche. Number 3, the Great Flood. This symbol of destruction and rebirth appears in over 500 cultures worldwide. From the biblical Noah to the Mesopotamian Utnapishtim, from Greek Deucalion to Mayan flood myths, this motif recurs with remarkable consistency. Jung interpreted flood myths psychologically as representing the overwhelming of consciousness by unconscious contents. What happens when the boundaries between conscious and unconscious break down? But the flood is also followed by new creation, symbolizing psychological renewal and transformation. Jung observed similar patterns in patients who experienced psychological floods, periods of overwhelming emotion or even psychotic episodes that, when properly integrated, led to profound renewal. Number 4, the Divine Child. From the infant Hercules to the baby Krishna, from the child Horus to the Christ child, myths worldwide feature children of miraculous birth who represent renewal and potential. Jung saw the divine child archetype as representing new possibilities emerging from the unconscious. In psychological terms, the divine child represents nascent aspects of the self that often appear during major life transitions. Jung noticed divine child imagery appearing in the dreams and artwork of patients undergoing significant psychological regeneration. One middle-aged woman, beginning a new phase of life after her children left home, dreamed repeatedly of caring for a mysterious, luminous child, a symbol of her own emerging new identity. Number 5, the Mandala. This circular symbol with a central point appears across cultures from Tibetan Buddhism to Native American sand paintings, from Gothic cathedral rose windows to ancient Celtic designs. Jung considered the mandala the primary symbol of the self, representing wholeness, integration, and the organization of psychic elements around a center. He collected hundreds of mandala images produced spontaneously by patients during periods of psychological integration. One remarkable case involved a man with no knowledge of Eastern spiritual practices who, during a period of intense psychological upheaval, began spontaneously drawing circular designs with symmetrical patterns, perfect mandalas that helped him re-establish psychological balance. Jung wrote, the mandala is an archetypal image whose occurrence is attested throughout the ages. It signifies the wholeness of the self. This circular image represents the wholeness of the psychic ground, or, to put it in mythic terms, the divinity incarnate in man. Jung demonstrated the existence of the collective unconscious through case studies of patients who dreamed of ancient religious symbols they had no prior exposure to. One remarkable example involved a patient who dreamed of a mandala pattern identical to one found in Eastern religious traditions, despite having no knowledge of these traditions. Another patient dreamed of an elaborate ritual that closely paralleled ancient Mithraic initiation rites, though he had never studied this extinct religion. The details were so specific that Jung, who had studied Mithraism, was astonished by their accuracy. What makes these universal symbols so powerful is that they don't just appear in ancient myths or religious texts. They continue to emerge spontaneously in dreams, art, and even in symptoms. They represent what Jung called the living myth, the continuing activity of the archetypal psyche in modern humans. Jung collected thousands of examples of these universal symbols appearing in the dreams and artwork of his patients. A businessman with no artistic training began painting circular designs during a midlife crisis. A housewife dreamed of a sacred tree during a period of spiritual awakening. A scientist encountered a wise old man in dreams during a difficult career decision. These symbols don't just appear randomly. They emerge at psychologically significant moments when the conscious mind needs guidance from deeper sources. The mandala typically appears during periods of psychological disorientation, providing a symbol of wholeness when the ego feels fragmented. The world tree often emerges when a person needs to establish better connections between different levels of consciousness. Understanding these universal symbols gives us a powerful tool for psychological growth. When we recognize these patterns in our dreams or in our emotional reactions, we can work with them consciously, rather than being unconsciously driven by them. For example, recognizing dragon imagery in dreams might help us identify what treasures in our psyche are being guarded by fear or resistance. Noticing tree imagery might alert us to opportunities for better integrating different aspects of ourselves. These symbols form a kind of alphabet of the soul, a language through which the deeper parts of the psyche communicate with consciousness. Learning this symbolic language was, for Jung, one of the most important tasks of psychological development. As we move into our next section, I invite you to reflect on which of these universal symbols most resonates with you. Have you encountered any of these symbols in your dreams? Do any of them evoke a particularly strong emotional response? Your answers may offer clues to which archetypal energies are most active in your psyche right now. Section 6. The influence of ancient mythology on modern psychology. Jung diagnosed a profound spiritual crisis in modern humanity. He wrote that our disconnection from symbolic understanding is one of the primary causes of what he called the neurosis of our time. In Man and His Symbols, Jung states, man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional unconscious identity with natural phenomena. These have slowly lost their symbolic implications. Thunder is no longer the voice of an angry god, nor is lightning his avenging missile. No river contains a spirit. No tree is the life principle of a man. No snake the embodiment of wisdom. No mountain cave the home of a great demon. This disconnection has serious consequences. Without meaningful symbols to help us understand our inner experiences, we struggle to make sense of our lives. We lose touch with the deeper currents of meaning that sustained our ancestors. Modern consciousness, with its emphasis on rationality and materialism, has gained much, but also lost something vital, the symbolic dimension that connects us to deeper aspects of ourselves and to the natural world. Jung observed, as scientific understanding has grown, so our world has become dehumanized. Man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional, unconscious identity with natural phenomena. Yet despite our conscious rejection of mythology, these ancient patterns continue to operate in our psyche. They appear in our dreams, in our art, in our entertainment, and in our emotional reactions. Jung observed how mythological archetypes still appear prominently in the dreams of modern people who have no conscious interest in mythology. A business executive might dream of slaying a dragon, or a housewife might dream of discovering a hidden room in her house, modern versions of ancient mythological motifs. One of Jung's patients, a rational scientist, was disturbed by recurring dreams of a giant snake. Despite his scientific worldview, this primal symbol emerged from his unconscious during a period of significant transformation in his life. The snake represented the renewal and transformation his rational mind couldn't fully comprehend, but his deeper psyche recognized. We see mythological patterns in our popular culture as well. Modern superhero films follow the classic hero's journey pattern. Harry Potter, Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, all follow the archetypal hero's journey structure. Fantasy literature draws heavily on mythological themes and symbols. Even video games often involve heroic quests and confrontations with shadow figures. The Marvel superhero Iron Man perfectly illustrates the wounded hero archetype, the flawed protagonist who must overcome internal weaknesses to achieve heroic potential. Captain America represents the more classical hero archetype, the embodiment of collective ideals and values. Jung would not have been surprised by the enormous popularity of these mythologically structured stories. He would have recognized that they satisfy a hunger for meaningful symbolic narratives that our rational culture fails to provide. Even in our supposedly rational economic and political systems, mythological patterns emerge. Jung noted how the myth of progress, das Du I, the belief in unlimited economic growth and technological advancement, had taken on religious qualities for many modern people, despite lacking the psychological depth of traditional myths. Jung made a prescient prediction. When societies reject traditional mythology and symbolism, people become vulnerable to what he called political mythologies, simplistic collective beliefs that promise certainty in an uncertain world. The totalitarian movements of the 20th century demonstrated the terrible power of such primitive mythologies when they capture the collective imagination. Nazi Germany's appropriation of Germanic mythological symbols and Soviet communism's quasi-religious ideology of historical progress both illustrated Jung's warning about what happens when rational consciousness becomes disconnected from deeper symbolic understanding. These movements filled the symbolic vacuum with destructive mythologies that captivated millions. As Jung wrote, when conscious life becomes too rational and focused on external reality, the unconscious produces compensatory mythological content. If we don't engage consciously with mythology, it will emerge unconsciously in potentially destructive forms. This dynamic operates not just collectively, but individually. Jung documented numerous cases where rejection of symbolic experience led to psychological disturbances. One highly rational patient who dismissed all irrational elements of life developed severe anxiety that only resolved when he began to engage with the symbolic dimensions of his experience. Jung also observed how modern people often turn to substitutes for genuine mythological engagement. Addictions, obsessions with celebrities, extreme political ideologies, and even certain forms of consumerism can represent misguided attempts to satisfy the psyche's need for mythological meaning. Yet, Jung also saw signs of renewal. The growing interest in Eastern spirituality, the environmental movement's reverence for nature, and renewed interest in indigenous wisdom all represented attempts to recover the symbolic connection between humans and the natural world. Jung himself contributed to this renewal by legitimizing the psychological value of symbolic and mythological material. By demonstrating its psychological, rather than merely superstitious nature, he helped modern people reclaim this vital dimension of human experience. The key insight Jung offered was that we don't need to literally believe myths to benefit from them. A myth can be psychologically true without being historically or scientifically factual. Its value lies not in its objective accuracy, but in its capacity to give meaningful form to deep psychological realities. As Jung wrote, the primitive mentality does not invent myths, it experiences them. For our ancestors, myths weren't fictional stories, but expressions of psychic reality experienced as objectively real. Modern people can approach myths more consciously, recognizing them as symbolic expressions of psychological truth rather than literal accounts of external events. This more sophisticated approach allows us to engage with mythology without abandoning rational thinking. We can recognize both the literal falsity and the psychological truth of mythic narratives, holding both perspectives simultaneously. I'm curious, what film, comic book, or game do you see containing elements of ancient mythology? Share your thoughts in the comments. As we move toward more practical applications of Jung's insights, consider how reconnecting with mythological understanding might enrich your own life. What areas of your experience seem to lack meaning or depth? Are there recurring patterns in your life that might benefit from being understood in mythological terms? The wisdom of myths isn't locked in the past. It's available to anyone willing to engage with the symbolic dimension of experience. Section 7. Practical applications in modern life. Jung wasn't content with theoretical understanding alone. He developed practical methods for reconnecting with the symbolic dimension of life. These techniques remain valuable tools for modern people seeking psychological wholeness. One of Jung's most powerful methods was what he called active imagination, a technique for dialoguing with images and figures from the unconscious. Here's how Jung described the process in Man and His Symbols. In active imagination, you concentrate on a specific point, mood, picture, or event. You observe the scene and note what happens spontaneously. Imagination will begin to work, and your conscious mind can reach a new understanding of the unconscious figures. Unlike passive fantasy, active imagination involves conscious participation in a dialogue with unconscious content. The ego remains present and engaged, rather than being overwhelmed by unconscious material. Step 1. Begin in a meditative state, focusing on a dream image, emotional issue, or symbol that has energy for you. Create a quiet, undisturbed space, and adopt a receptive attitude, alert, but not controlling. Step 2. Allow the image to develop autonomously. Don't direct it consciously. Let it unfold according to its own logic. Watch as if observing a movie unfold, noting details and developments without interfering. Step 3. Engage with the figures or images that appear. Ask questions. Listen for responses. Have a dialogue. This is the crucial step that distinguishes active imagination from passive fantasy. You're not just watching, but actively participating. Step 4. Record your experience through writing, drawing, or movement. This helps integrate the experience and creates a record you can reflect on later. Many of Jung's patients kept detailed journals of their active imagination experiences. Step 5. Reflect on the significance and apply insights to your life. Ask yourself, what is this figure or image trying to communicate? How might this relate to my current life situation? What action or attitude adjustment might be called for? Jung documented numerous cases where active imagination led to breakthrough insights and psychological transformation. One businessman resolved a career dilemma through dialoguing with a wise old man figure that emerged in active imagination. A woman worked through grief by conversing with the image of her deceased husband, ultimately reaching a more peaceful relationship with her loss. The key to effective active imagination is maintaining the right balance between conscious participation and allowing the unconscious to speak. Too much conscious control prevents authentic, unconscious content from emerging. Too little conscious engagement turns the exercise into passive fantasy without transformative potential. Jung also developed specific techniques for working with dreams through a mythological lens. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as expressions of repressed desires, Jung viewed dreams as communications from the unconscious designed to compensate for one-sided conscious attitudes. To work with dreams in a Jungian way. Step 1. Record your dreams regularly, noting all details. Keep a dream journal by your bed and write down dreams immediately upon waking, before they fade. Include every detail you can remember, even seemingly insignificant elements. Step 2. Identify the mythological elements and archetypal patterns. Ask yourself, does this dream contain any familiar mythological motifs? Are there figures that might represent archetypes, wise guides, fearsome creatures, divine children, etc.? Step 3. Consider how these elements relate to your current life situation. Jung believed dreams often compensate for conscious attitudes. If you're being overly rational in waking life, dreams might present emotional or intuitive content. If you're avoiding a truth, dreams might confront you with it symbolically. Step 4. Look for the compensatory message. What perspective is your unconscious offering that your conscious mind is neglecting? Jung emphasized that dreams don't typically solve problems directly, but offer neglected perspectives that can lead to more balanced understanding. One of Jung's patients, a man with an overly intellectual approach to life, repeatedly dreamed of floods and storms, symbols of emotional forces he was neglecting in his conscious approach. By recognizing this compensatory message, he began developing greater emotional awareness in his waking life. Another patient, caught in a destructive relationship pattern, dreamed of a labyrinth with a monster at its center. Working with this dream helped her recognize how she was trapped in repetitive patterns and needed to confront her own internal monster, her unconscious participation in these destructive dynamics. Beyond these specific techniques, Jung advocated integrating mythological understanding into everyday life by: Number 1. Recognizing the personal myths operating in your life. What stories are you living out unconsciously? Are you caught in a rescue fantasy, repeatedly trying to save others? Are you living an exile myth, feeling perpetually alienated from your environment? Becoming conscious of these narratives is the first step toward choosing which aspects serve your development and which need revision. Number 2. Creating meaningful personal rituals and symbols that acknowledge the deeper dimensions of experience. Jung himself built a stone tower at Bollingen where he engaged in ritual activities that expressed his inner symbolic life. While not everyone needs to build a tower, creating even simple rituals around significant life events can help reconnect with symbolic dimensions of experience. Number 3. Finding community with others interested in symbolic understanding. Jung recognized that individuation requires both personal inner work and meaningful connection with others. Sharing symbolic experiences in appropriate contexts can amplify their transformative potential. This might involve joining a dream group, finding a Jungian-oriented therapist, or simply maintaining friendships where deeper conversations about symbolic experience are welcomed. Jung also encouraged the study of mythology, fairy tales, and religious symbolism as ways to educate the conscious mind about archetypal patterns. One of his patients, a woman suffering from severe anxiety with no apparent cause, found significant relief through studying mythological parallels to her symptoms. Recognizing her experience as part of a universal human pattern helped reduce her sense of isolation and gave meaningful context to her suffering. Art making provides another powerful way to engage with symbolic material. Jung encouraged patients to express dream images or emotional states through drawing, painting, or sculpture, even without artistic training. The goal wasn't aesthetic achievement, but psychological expression and integration. One businessman with no artistic background began spontaneously drawing mandalas during a period of psychological distress. This creative activity not only provided relief, but helped him visualize and work toward the psychological wholeness he was seeking. Body-oriented practices can also connect us with symbolic dimensions of experience. Jung noted that Certain physical symptoms express symbolic content that consciousness has failed to recognize. By approaching physical experiences with symbolic awareness, we can sometimes access deeper meanings and facilitate healing. A woman suffering from chronic throat tension discovered, through active imagination, that this physical symptom symbolized unexpressed truth she needed to voice. As she began speaking her truth in appropriate ways, the physical symptom gradually resolved. Nature connection offers another avenue for symbolic renewal. Jung observed that modern alienation from nature corresponds to alienation from our own instinctual nature. By consciously reconnecting with the natural world, we can also reconnect with deeper aspects of ourselves. One of Jung's patients, an urban intellectual suffering from depression, found significant relief through regular wilderness experiences. The natural cycles of day and night, the seasons, and the organic patterns of growth and decay provided living symbols that helped him re-establish connection with his own natural rhythms. What unites all these practices is the cultivation of symbolic awareness, the capacity to perceive and engage with the symbolic dimension of experience alongside its literal aspects. Jung didn't advocate abandoning rational consciousness, but rather complementing it with symbolic understanding. As Jung wrote, the symbolic life is the expression of the daily need of the soul. Without this dimension, life becomes mechanistic and meaningless, regardless of material success or comfort. With it, even ordinary experiences can become infused with deeper significance and connection to the collective human journey. These practices might seem removed from practical concerns, but Jung found they often led to surprisingly concrete benefits: improved relationships, enhanced creativity, better decision-making, and greater resilience in facing life's challenges. By connecting with deeper patterns that transcend individual experience, people often found new resources for addressing very personal and practical problems. As you consider which of these practices might be valuable in your own life, remember that Jung emphasized individuality in psychological development. The specific forms of symbolic engagement that benefit one person might not work for another. The key is finding authentic ways to reconnect with the symbolic dimension that resonate with your unique psychological makeup and life situation. Section 8. Future Pacing and Conclusion. As we bring our exploration to a close, let's summarize Jung's core insights about the relationship between ancient mythology and modern psychology. Mythology is not mere fantasy, but an expression of the collective unconscious, the psychological heritage shared by all humanity. The same forces that gave rise to ancient myths continue to operate in our psyches today, whether we recognize them or not. Archetypes are the bridges between instinct and consciousness, shaping our experiences in patterns common to all humans. They provide the underlying structure of both ancient myths and modern psychological experience. Mythological symbols remain active in the modern psyche, appearing in our dreams, art, entertainment, and emotional reactions. Understanding these symbols gives us access to deeper dimensions of our own experience and connects us to the collective human journey. Jung left us with a powerful vision of how mythological understanding can enrich modern life. Imagine waking up tomorrow and recognizing that each dream, each deep emotion, even each inexplicable attraction is a message from your unconscious, a communication in the language of symbols that connects you to the collective wisdom of humanity. As you move through your day, you might notice symbols and patterns that previously escaped your attention. The difficult colleague who triggers intense emotions might be carrying a projection of your shadow. The recurring dream of flying might be your psyche's way of pointing toward greater freedom. The unexpected fascination with a mythological figure might reveal an archetype seeking expression in your life. By reclaiming this symbolic dimension, you don't reject rational thought or scientific understanding. Rather, you complement them with a deeper, richer way of experiencing reality, one that honors both the rational and the mythic aspects of human experience. As Jung powerfully stated, modern man does not understand how much his rationalism has put him at the mercy of the psychic underworld. He has freed himself from superstition, or so he believes, but in the process he has lost his spiritual values to a positively dangerous degree. His moral and spiritual tradition has disintegrated, and he is now paying the price for this breakup in worldwide disorientation and dissociation. This warning, written decades ago, seems even more relevant in our hyper-rational, digitally disconnected age. When we lose touch with the symbolic dimension, we become vulnerable to manipulation by forces we don't understand. both from without and from within. But Jung offers hope as well. The man who has had the experience of assimilating some of the symbolism of the unconscious is in a far more favorable position. He has gained something that can never be lost or taken away from him. He has acquired a sense of the cosmic relationship of the human psyche with the larger reality that surrounds us. This cosmic relationship provides an antidote to the alienation and meaninglessness that afflict so many modern people. By reconnecting with the symbolic dimension, we rediscover our place in a meaningful universe, not through blind faith or rejection of reason, but through direct psychological experience of the patterns that connect us to nature and to each other. Jung believed that understanding personal mythology is the key to living a more whole and integrated life. Begin paying attention to the symbols appearing in your dreams and daily life, and share what you discover. For, in reconnecting with these ancient patterns, we find not superstition but a profound wisdom that can guide us through the complexities of modern existence. The journey of individuation that Jung described isn't an escape from reality, but a deeper engagement with it. By integrating conscious and unconscious, rational and symbolic, personal and collective, we move toward greater wholeness, what Jung called the self. This integration doesn't happen all at once. It's a lifelong process with many cycles of death and rebirth, many confrontations with shadow, many discoveries of unexpected inner resources. The hero's journey isn't undertaken once, but repeatedly throughout life, with each cycle bringing new challenges and new possibilities for growth. As Jung wrote near the end of his life, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This simple statement contains the essence of Jung's vision, that human fulfillment comes not from conforming to external expectations or achieving conventional success, but from the authentic expression of our unique individuality in conscious relationship with the collective patterns we share with all humanity. The ancient myths are not dead. They live within you, and when acknowledged consciously, they can transform your experience of being human in ways both subtle and profound. What symbol or mythological figure will you look for in your own life journey? What dragon might you need to face? What treasure awaits your discovery? What new aspect of yourself is waiting to be born through this heroic confrontation with the unknown? As you continue your own unique journey of individuation, remember Jung's words. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. The wisdom of mythology isn't locked in ancient texts or artifacts. It's alive in your dreams, your imagination, your deepest emotions. It speaks the language of symbols, a language your soul already knows. Listen carefully. The myths are speaking to you. What will you hear?